You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA. You know ID in the town all day. ID in the SEA.
Hello and welcome to episode 445 of the Fabulous Peltoncast, sponsored by our friends at Pagliacci Pizza. I'm pushing through it. I'm your co-host, Kevin Felton.
And I'm Tristan Carcino.
And we are coming to you from separate locations. I'm in Seattle, Washington, home of the four-time WNBA champion Storm.
And I'm coming to you from Renton, Washington, home of the Super Bowl 48 champion Seattle Seahawks.
Technically still tied for first place in the NFC West, but boy, does it not feel like it. Compared to low those 6 days ago when we were so much younger and we recorded.
Oh, we were riding high back in 2024. This is one of the few times where, so we recorded the post-pod stuff pre-pod, and you captured my sigh at the intro. Full circle.
Just
this episode can be listened to on a
oh wow, or is a flat circle. Who knows? It exists outside the time-space continuum. The Peltoncast episode 445.
It's the 90s. No, whatever.
Oh, that's a reference to Michael Che on
so good.
Weekend Update. It is a great call.
The best part is when you explain what references are.
Well, not everyone here listens to or watches SNL. Okay,
so every reference we should pause the podcast, and just because somebody might not get it and be like, all right, but we don't have we're not annotating the podcast while we're doing it.
Like there are some references. Okay, this is kind of
like I just want to pause for a second. That's a reference to Finding Forrester from 2001.
Again, that's gonna be something they're not gonna listen to for 3 to 4 hours.
An Easter egg. I'm setting it up. You're ruining the reference to the reference about the reference.
Maybe podcasts need footnotes.
This is my flu game.
There are some references, like if you think about it from a cartoon sense. What was something that I recently rewatched? I don't know that we watched the Santa Claus recently for the first time since I was a child. It's not something that I've ever had any interest in revisiting. I don't know that there were any examples of this, but like there are some things that are like designed for kids, but there are also references for adults. And then you watch it as an adult and you're like, oh, I get this now. Mm-hmm. So
that's like the entire Pixar universe. That's like the point of Pixar now.
Exactly.
They have jokes and the adults could be like, ha ha ha,
But sometimes you say something like it's the 90s and that's just going to stop people. They're going to bump against that if they don't know what the reference is. So that's why it has to be explained.
And be like, it's not actually the 90s.
Yes.
That's what you think people are going to be like, hold on a second, podcast that I'm listening to on my digital streaming service. Look, it's not the 90s at all.
We already have enough Peltoncast geography, Peltoncast climatology. I don't know if we need to issue an official correction about the comfortability of Seattle relative to Chiba City, which we determined on the Discord with the help
one
of
way
AI.
I know it's not the 90s is because Oasis is now unironically popular, and in the 90s they were ironically popular.
They weren't. So if you haven't listened to our Year in Music podcast, that came out on Monday. Be sure to check that out. It's always a lot of fun to record and hear all the reactions to that. You'll hear about that later.
Mansplain too.
Yeah. Anything else before we get into the toast?
Oh God. I'm just trying to distract from the sports.
Well, the toasts are somewhat happy, at least from a UW football standpoint. Maybe not from a Seahawks standpoint, one of these at least. It's an all UW football alumni edition of the toast. We don't have a lot going on in Seattle sports right now, but congrats to Michael Penix Jr.
as we enter hour 2:30.
Oh no. That's why we spend so much time on the asides. The asides channel in the Discord is the most popular. Congrats to Michael Penix Jr., who will make his first career start this weekend. I believe against the Giants after replacing the struggling Kirk Cousins as the Atlanta Falcons starting quarterback.
There we go. I even though this might hurt the Seahawks playoff chances, probably not, but come on, bring it on. I saw that. It's one of those moments where you're like, the rookie quarterback is taking over for the experienced veteran quarterback, and I am so confident he's going to be better.
It was a rough end for Kirk Cousins. Has a very good run for a long period of time. Maybe good again. Who knows? But was not certainly against the Las Vegas Raiders. on Monday night, so it felt like it was time. It did ruin the possibility that had Penix made his first career start in week 17, as friend of the pod John Hollinger noted on Blue Sky, it would have been against a team named Washington in what is apparently now, this was news to me, apparently now known as Northwest Stadium, the former FedEx Field.
Wait, that's the actual name of it, not like a joke?
I don't think that was a joke. It was in the tweet he was
Washington
quoting.
plays in Northwest Stadium?
Yes, this is
Wow.
an accurate thing. Is it known after North? It's not even Northwest Airlines. Well, Northwest Airlines hasn't existed for many years. Northwest Federal Credit Union.
Potential
now
out.
holds
This is
the-
after 2025, 2026, 2 years, 100 million, 35 million dead cap.
That's the Kirk Cousins contract.
Yeah, the dead cap if they cut him this offseason, a cool $65 million.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about this back when they first drafted Penix, that it could have potentially like not worked that terribly financially if they had been able to trade Cousins. Not sure they're going to be able to trade Cousins at this point. So there you go.
That was a decision that was made.
Of all the decisions, that was one of them.
You know, he led them to 500 so far before being benched.
Losses to both teams involved in this weekend's Seahawks game. Also this week, we have a congrats to Buda Baker, who signed a contract extension with the Cardinals on Tuesday. Has had an incredible career in Arizona, continues to be very successful, and will continue playing against the Seahawks for 2 times a year for the foreseeable future.
Bring back the territorial draft.
Wow. You said it.
I don't know if that was ever a thing in the NFL, but bring it back.
Probably was at some point. I got to figure. All right, well, we don't have a coach's corner this week, so I believe this takes us right into the segment you're so excited about.
Wow. Okay.
It is the return, the long dormant, awakening after an off-season slumber, right in time for hot stove season, I suppose. Your favorite segment.
Don't burn yourself. We got Mariners hot takes coming at ya.
This take is just for Jerry DePoto. So everyone else mute this, please. I'll give you a second. Okay. Jerry! We were promised one thing by you, and that is transact. And in this particular regard, you have failed to deliver. We don't expect wins. We don't expect great decision making. We don't expect you to spend big money. But the one thing we expect is some action. The winter meetings have come and gone. Free agency has been open for 6 weeks, and we've gotten nothing. A few Castillo rumors, a Roki pitch with Ichiro, but it's not enough. A few draft lotteries, a few free agent non-tenders, but it's not enough. Jerry! We have so little in our lives right now. The Sounder season is over. A hot take free music podcast, the Huskies in the Sun Bowl, a descendant of fascism, some not so great Osobor play. We need this. The Mariners off seasons are supposed to be crazy, scary, spooky, hilarious, with salary dumps, Christmas Eve signings, formerly top 10 prospects traded for boxes of Cracker Jacks. I will stand for losing, but not even doing transact. Jerry, it's not enough.
Well, that was not the direction I was expecting you to go with the hot take here. I mean, we said it, I think, last week.
Sorry, do you want me to explain what those references were? For... 700-page post note.
I mean, look, if 162 words counts as a manifesto or whatever, then
That was the
hot takes
manifesto.
maybe.
They'll call anything a manifesto these days.
What was the length of the manifesto? Hold on here. Is it? It's got to be on Genius, right? Oh, it's not coming up fast enough.
My favorite thing that happens on the internet is when somebody means to say says, and they say like announces or releases. And
Oh yeah,
they're
that's not my favorite thing.
they're like this basketball player releases the fact, and it's like they said words. What
I
you're trying to
mean,
say is they said
This
words.
happens when I write stories, and it's like, no, I wrote it, said it is perfectly fine, but it's like unveils.
Unveils, yeah.
This is it's all SEO. That's what the algorithm is telling them they need to do.
Who's Googling that specifically, though? If it's SEO, is somebody Googling like decision unveiled?
No, I mean
Thomas Bryant trade
it's
unveiled?
not actually SEO. It's click-through rate.
Yes.
People are more likely to click on things that are. I mean, this is one of my constant things. Is like everyone complains about like something like that or algorithms in general, and it's like the problem is not the algorithms. The algorithms are just telling us how. I mean, the algorithms are problematic, but mostly the algorithms are telling us how horrible we as a society are. They're just holding. They're a mirror. They're reflecting us. We're the monster in the mirror here.
Algorithms are people.
That is not what I said. I'm clicking on TMZ, which
just to find out. We don't need to go with
guess
that
what?
deep.
It's revealed in this
Revealed.
case. 262 words. I shortchanged him 100. It's
Okay.
262 words. All right, anyways. The MLB offseason does remain pretty slow paced, I would say. And the rumors around the Mariners are strong, particularly with the possibility of them trading Luis Castillo. And people are prepared to be angry about a Luis Castillo trade without knowing what that trade actually consists of, what it brings in return.
Do you actually think people are prepared to be angry about it? Who are people? That's the thing. Like, I do think there are people who are prepared to be angry about it and to make a bigger story about it. It's probably still relatively small. I will say that most of the conversations I've had, I got texted by a Dodgers fan today. This is actually the craziest thing. It's like a work person. And the beginning of a text, if you get a random work text from somebody that you're like not that close with, and it starts with the first sentence is, I keep hearing rumblings. And I'm like, I'm a little I like glanced at my phone. I'm like, I keep hearing rumblings about what? Then it was that y'all are shopping Castillo. In some worlds, I'm known as a Mariners fan. If you can get a good haul for him, I actually think it's a good move. He seems slightly on the decline. And I'm like, all right.
I mean, look, I made the case for a Luis Castillo trade last July that fundamentally, if you have as many quality starting pitchers as the Mariners do, they can't all pitch in the playoffs or can't all start in the playoffs. You know, they're in the value of Luis Castillo, if he's your second, maybe third best starter, is not nearly the same as it would be to an organization where he would be their best starter and pitching multiple times, starting multiple times in a playoff series. And therefore, like people, when they consider whether a team should make a trade, what they think is this player good? Then no, the flow chart is no, they shouldn't trade them. Is this player bad? Then yes, obviously you should trade him. But that's not actually the way that trading makes sense. Is this player worth more to another team than to my team? Either because they incorrectly perceive their ability or because there's some sort of a fit type of thing that makes them more valuable elsewhere. And this does seem to me to be a case where Luis Castillo is potentially more valuable to another team than he is the Mariners.
I knew we were going to get the man who invented the trade grade. I knew we were going to get an ESPN senior writer, Kevin Pelton, diatribe.
Again, friend of the pod, John Hollinger, invented the trade grade. I mean, I don't know who anyone
perfected the trade grade, but
I didn't use that term.
Now
you see the SEC.
ESPN senior writer Kevin Pelton reveals he invented the trade grade.
No, perfected.
Reveals he perfected the trade grade. Unleashes.
Even by our standards, this is an unhinged podcast.
But I thought we were going to get an ESPN senior writer, Kevin Pelton, for what? Yes.
Yes, that's the thing.
Should the Mariners trade Luis Castillo? Yes. For what? Maybe. Like
when I did chats, people would say that. Should Team A trade player B? Should the Jazz trade Gordon Hayward? It's like
people love that answer. Just a maybe.
Oh, let me tell you, those chats were surprisingly popular.
That's why you're rising up the ranks of ESPN.
Surprisingly popular for the fact that most of my answers were, I don't know. Most things are fine.
Anyway,
give every trade a B.
That's what I'm saying about Castillo. It's like I like Luis Castillo. if we can make up a scenario that Luis Castillo's traded for something really a very promising player or package, then of course they should trade Luis Castillo. If Luis Castillo's traded for a less promising player or package, maybe not.
If it's
Maybe
a
they
Jared
should-
Kelnick situation.
There's almost no way. I guess I don't know. I wouldn't put it past him. When I
I
saw
mean,
that
that
the Mariners
was, I think
traded
it
Kelenic,
was,
I was
wasn't
it was
Ken Rosenthal who reported it. Was it? Someone reported that they're not going to just give him away in a salary dump. And it's like, well, I sure hope not.
No, I mean, right now, the thing that we've learned about Luis Castillo is Luis Castillo today is a more valuable trade piece than he was a month ago. Because starting pitching contracts have ballooned in free agency, as basically all things do in free agency. And Luis Castillo is on a relatively good contract. Is he slightly on the decline? Possibly. Luis Castillo also being slightly on the decline still means he's a really good pitcher. And this is another, man, you're just the Kevin Belton points. If you're starting from a really high point and you decline a little bit, you could still be good.
Well, I've incepted you.
So I can't have a take about Luis Castillo because I don't know what they're trading him for. And we can have the Tristan Casas thing. I'm kind of like, yeah, I think that would be a good decision. But it seems like most of those reports were immediately denied. I don't know what is the new chatter of a return.
You got to text your friend.
Yeah, the Dodgers fan.
Yeah, he's hearing things. It was Ken Rosenthal who wrote that. It sounded like the Red Sox were not actually interested in doing Casas for Castillo as the framework of a deal. I mean, the other thing that came up on the Discord where you said something that I've been thinking for a long period of time is that it's frustrating that one of the frustrating things about the Mariners unwillingness to spend money, their cheapness, is that every decision they make gets framed through that cheapness lens, even if it's something that has nothing to do with it. The Jerry Dipoto would make this decision even if he had an unlimited budget. And it just becomes such a tiresome, reductive debate because
if you had
everything
an
comes
unlimited
back
budget, you would never trade anybody.
I suppose, because you would still trade
You would sign
someone.
every player.
You'd still only get 25 spots on your roster, and you would immediately waive someone like Mitch Haniger instead of keeping him on the roster just in case you can salary dump him later. Like, that's the scenario that would be different, but you wouldn't just have every play. You would sometimes trade players. But it just becomes such a reductive debate because it's like, yes, of course we think the Mariners should spend more money, but we live in this reality where they're spending this amount of money and they should try to spend that money in the most efficient way so that they can win baseball games. And someone pointed out on the Discord, I should find this, the Silicon Valley meme that we did with Chris Peterson. Wouldn't trade Coach Pete for anybody, but
What? I didn't know that was a Silicon Valley meme.
oh yeah, I forget where it originated from. I think it was like the other founders were upset at Richard, and they were like, well, "We would never say anything negative about Richard," but so that's what I think
Sure
we
put in,
should
sure
do
put
for
in
the-
Jake Hainer at Cal. Sure happened.
I mean, yes, but again, wouldn't
Probably
trade Coach Pete.
Second best coach in Husky history. Third? I don't know.
Are we talking modern division or is Enoch Bagshaw eligible?
After I do a quick Google search of Enoch Bagshaw, then they become eligible.
What was Enoch Bagshaw's record? He coached from 1921 to 1929. Not as good as I thought. 63, 22, and 6. Tied a Rose Bowl and lost a Rose Bowl.
Oh, come on.
Must not be who I'm actually thinking of.
Yeah, Enoch Bagshaw sucks.
But definitely the best Welsh UW coach,
Okay.
undoubtedly. Yeah. So I do think that's a reasonable thing. If we just preface all our Mariners conversations with this was Ben Diddy on the Discard. Of course the Mariners should spend more, but in the world where they live, considering a Luis Castillo trade, if it's to get a quality hitter under team control and not to just dump his salary is a completely reasonable thing to discuss.
Well, I think the other piece is Tristan Casas is a valuable player, right? It's not
Incredibly,
like
yeah.
you look at him. I don't know. Maybe there's future star potential. He had a fine
Your
season this
position
last
on
year.
star potential is a little off, although we did do some offline research on top number 3 draft picks and where they land in the prospect rankings. I don't know if you want to summarize that.
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But
Well, it's
but
reasonable the possibility that the Mariners pick at number 3 next year could immediately become their best prospect based
the
on the history.
the thing about Tristan Casas, right, who was a player that the Red Sox did not seem interested in trading, and the Red Sox hypothetically were interested in Luis Castillo. Other teams are aware of all of the information that we're aware of. So when considering a package for Castillo, I think, your eyes get wide about it or whatever. But the thing about Castillo probably being slightly on the decline, people are also aware of the value of young hitting vis-a-vis pitching is also a thing that teams are aware of. The Mariners may not trade Luis Castillo.
Yes.
That I think is the thing that people are underestimating is rumblings don't mean that something is going to happen. The rumblings might even be from the Mariners themselves looking for a package to kind of be drummed up. I'm sure there's a type of package that the Mariners are looking for. They don't need to trade Luis Castillo, right?
No.
There's not an urgency to it. I suppose
Even if they
his
do
value,
trade him, I don't think it will be because they felt they needed to do it.
his value is probably the highest right now that it'll be, but there could be Castillo could be dominant through July, and the Mariners could still be out of the playoff hunt or whatever, or enough games back. I think that's probably unlikely that that scenario happens, and they could trade him to a team that wants to make a playoff push. There is a hypothetical time in the future that Castillo's value is higher than it is right now. So, or they could, I mean, how many years are left on the deal? Not that many, right?
It's a surprising number. No, one of the other factors we haven't talked about here is Luis Castillo currently has a no trade clause. He only holds that no trade clause through next season. Let me double check that. I think that's the information. So there actually is some incentive to potentially for Castillo to want to figure out a trade now, to agree to a trade now, because once he gets outside of the no trade period, he would therefore be eligible to be traded anywhere. You could
I
send
don't
him.
like what is the place that Castillo where it's like, you're going
They-
to Pittsburgh, buddy.
They can afford to bring in Luis Castillo, but they're
Yeah, where
not a place he
there's a
wants to
team
go.
that wants to trade for Luis Castillo that it's like Luis Castillo notably hates playing here.
It's a fair question. I'm just saying that's an interesting wild card here. By the way, the Silicon Valley pod, you know who was, we had special guest Reese Lazarus, his third Pelton brother.
Really?
And we discussed the San Antonio Stars moving to Las Vegas to become the Aces.
Wow,
on this
it's not going to
podcast.
work in my opinion.
We've been podcasting so long. This wasn't even like our first year back recording or anything.
Was that like right before a block party that Reese came on?
No, this was in October. He was just back in town. And there was a Reddit AMA where I probably answered something. I don't know. We'll see. So, wow, it's really all coming together here.
Mid podcast.
Well, we're on the knee.
Reese texted me also agreeing with me about the Katy Perry. He listened to the Katy Perry record actually, which is a little shocking, but
he was the one.
The point, yeah. And still, nobody listens to Katy Perry. The record only has millions of plays on it. It's like MJ Lenderman would fucking kill for the plays that Katy Perry has on the record. But MJ Lenderman's the hottest indie artist in the world, and Katy Perry is a flop. The world is a complicated place.
They were playing at Numos that week, as it turns out.
Bully was?
Yeah.
Anyway, he says that the record is truly horrible.
If we're gonna police language on the internet during this particular segment of the podcast, you mentioned needing to do things, and is a good rule of thumb, anytime you read on the internet that someone needs to do something, it actually just means should. You can almost 100% replace needs with should, and it will work and have the meaning that is actually intended.
I like how this is semantics pod.
No, we've already named this podcast. We can't rename it.
What is it?
It's coming 2 hours from now.
Oh, I don't even remember. Let's call it 3. Anyway, that I don't know. That's it. There is a chance. It is within the window of possibilities that Castillo is not traded. It really depends on what the package is and whether the Mariners like the package. If they roll into next year with some small moves and Castillo back, that's fine. I'm fine with that. Because it means, again, Jerry DiPoto's not stupid. You know? Like, Jerry DiPoto might be limited by budget. He might not always spend money the best ways, right? Some of the free agent decision making might be off. But he's aware that if there are good young hitting prospects available for Luis Castillo, he should trade Luis Castillo. But I think if he's not traded, the answer is those prospects aren't available. You know,
Right.
Nobody's presenting us with the packages. And if they end up taking something that is less than what we would ideally want, it also probably, it could mean that there's more information about Castillo that we don't even know, right?
Yeah.
So this is not a scenario of letting the Mariners off the hook. It's more of a trading is a slightly different thing. And when you're considering like young hitting prospects, if it were so easy to just trade good pitching for young hitting, everybody would do it. Which brings me to the next point, which is why would you ever draft hitting? It's like drafting, or
You mean
why would you
pitching?
ever draft pitching outside of like the back halves of the draft, right?
I mean,
Is-
this is literally in Moneyball, where Billy Bean wants to take more pitchers, and Paul DePodesta is like, we should just draft them, in saturation in like the 11th round and beyond.
Where's Paul DePodesta at? What is
Oh, he
his?
runs the Cleveland Browns now.
Yeah. Noted smart franchise. If you want to see what that dead money is for Kirk Cousins.
Hey, look, Jameis Winston. I guess Jameis Winston wasn't a
got
great signing.
benched.
He got benched. Dorian Thompson Robinson, amazing 6th round pick.
DTR.
Or did he only look good because he was throwing to Jake Bobo and Zach Charbonnet?
There it is. I do kind of feel like if the value of young hitting is so high vis-a-vis young pitching, it's kind of like, I get it. Maybe you want to develop your pitching as well, but like, why don't you go out and just get pitching later?
I mean, it is one unfortunate thing about the number 3 pick is it seems like if the top 2 prospects go as currently projected,
It's
then it's a
fucking
lot of
December.
pitchers.
There's
but
the entire college baseball season has to happen before then.
it's- I mean, I guess it does. Yes, the MLB draft does now take place after the entire college baseball season.
I am not judging who's going to be the third pick in the draft in a thing that we know nothing about. It's the same way that people are like, this thing is destined to happen. And then, it's like the Seahawks, it was like, man, I'm like, they need to lose this game to be able to get Jalen Carter with this pick. And then Jalen Carter is there for another 4 picks after they draft Devin Witherspoon.
That is correct.
So just the idea that you can,
And then because Jalen Carter is a former Georgia player on the Eagles, you are forced to downgrade his performance.
now he's a character issue.
Is Baby Fantasy Genius riding high? 12 and 2.
Oh yeah. I think the Eagles are going to the Super Bowl. Actually,
I haven't talked to him for a while.
I don't know about that. I think the Eagles or the Packers are going to the Super Bowl. I am officially out on the Lions.
You sure about that? That was a Tim Robinson reference. He's a noted Lions fan. Anything more on the Mariners?
Wow, that was like a three-dimensional chess reference.
Really covered a lot of bases. Okay.
I just want some transact people.
Well, last year, the Garver move, as you noted, happened on Christmas Eve. So perhaps we will have to put out a Christmas Eve emergency pod this year.
There it is. Give the people what they want.
Leave the party. We need to go downstairs and record an emergency pod.
Hello.
All right, let's get into the roundup, which is pretty short this week.
Are you sad about that? I like the idea that you love the
I
roundup.
don't love the roundup as much as you think I do. Like now, finally, my time to shine.
I get to just read information while Tristan sits there and stares off and forgets it immediately. I was like,
Or
there was
sends a
something
text.
that Luca was like saying something about Husky basketball. He was like, "Oh, they're playing," and I'm like, I know that Kevin told me that on the podcast, and I just have no idea. There's some Husky basketball game. He was like, it's coming on today, and I was like, this is all news to me. I've never heard this information before.
All right, Seattle Kraken, after their 5-1 win Thursday over the Bruins, their homestand ended in an ignominious fashion with back-to-back losses by a combined 8-1 margin. They'll start an unusual road trip Thursday in Chicago. They fly from Chicago to Vegas, then back east to Colorado within a 4-day span. A trip that would have made way more sense if you would have flipped Colorado and Vegas. All right, a brief Seattle Storm update. They will play the first ever WNBA regular season game outside the United States on August 15th in Vancouver against the Atlanta Dream. A nice little hidden benefit for the Storm here. It's technically a road game they're losing. But instead of having to fly to Atlanta, they get to either bus or take the very short flight to Vancouver for what will technically be a road game, and will probably have more fans in the crowd there. But yeah, I'm curious. I'm hoping to go up there and check that out at Rogers Arena. Well, this could have been the game Baby Fantasy Genius was talking about. Women's basketball played Saturday against Utah. They led 50-40 heading to the final period, but were outscored 27-7 over the last 10 minutes of a 67-57 loss, shooting 2-14 from the field in the fourth quarter, while Utah shot 7 of 10. Savia Sellers did have a career high 30 points on 11 of 22 shooting, and Tyra Ekai had 14 points and 9 boards, but just one other player scored more than 3 points for the Huskies. It was a particularly tough night for Delia Daniels, who was held to 3 points on 1 of 5 shooting with 5 turnovers. This week, the Huskies will host the Husky Classic, but won't face the best team who's coming to town, which is Boise State. Wednesday's opponent, North Dakota State, is ranked number 125 on BartTorvik.com, but has yet to play a power conference opponent. Their opponent on Thursday, Furman, 9-3, but has been beaten badly by both teams they've faced so far, ranked in the Bart Torvik top 100.
Can you tell me who Bart Torvik is?
He's a guy who basically cloned Ken Palm is a website, but has now added women's basketball this season. So it's a nice upgrade to some of the data in addition to what's already out there with herhoopstats.com and sports references women's college basketball coverage.
He also has men's stats as well.
Yes.
Is it slightly different than Ken Palm, or?
It's slightly different, but it looks almost exactly the same.
I mean, that's kind of what you think of when you're thinking of like onename.com, right?
Well, Ken Palm had the decency to abbreviate his last name. Bart Torvik put it all out there. UW men's basketball, after having the last week off, returns to action Wednesday against in-state rival Washington State, the first time that these two teams will meet in a non-conference men's basketball game. Do you know who coaches the Cougars?
It's not the guy left.
I'm not totally sure I can remember their former coach's first name. I want to say Keith Smith.
Kyle Smith,
Kyle
right?
Smith. Yeah, Kyle Smith. He went to Stanford, yes. He left.
Ernie Kent.
No. Sadly, no. They hired David Riley, who was formerly at Eastern Washington.
How would I have known that information?
I don't know.
This is a setup, sir.
But even I didn't know that information.
I like that you asked. There's like who coaches any NCAA basketball team. I'm telling. My interest in basketball right now is so low. I was watching the NBA Cup earlier today.
Okay, what are you trying to search for here? What information that I can provide are you searching for?
And what was more compelling to me than the NBA Cup championship, even with the Thunder losing in it, was the Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl.
Who was playing in that one? I saw it was on ESPN.
That was Memphis and West Virginia, baby.
Okay.
It is funny where it's like you get to a certain part of the year and you're like, bowls don't matter. Nobody cares. And then all of a sudden you're like, one of the biggest games in the NBA in the first half of the season, Scooters Coffee Frisco Bowl. And these two things are like equally balanced. So meanwhile, you're like, who's the head coach of Wazoo?
Despite the unwanted coaching change, Washington State off to a 9-2 start with a win at Nevada, where the Huskies lost. They also beat Boise State in Boise. Their losses have come to Iowa, in Moline, Illinois, and to SMU in the Acrisure Holiday Invitational Championship game. Of course, not to be confused with the Acrisure Invitational.
I was confused.
Where the Huskies remained champs. There were so many different Acrisure tournaments, but the only one that matters is the one that UW was in.
Mm-hmm.
They are led by UW transfer Nate Calmese, who's gone from averaging 4.1 points per game last season, is a little used reserve guard, to 15.5 points, 4.5 assists so far for the Cougars. Also, a local tie, Isaiah Watts, the son of Donald, grandson of Slick from West Seattle High School, has gone from averaging 3.7 points per game as a freshman for the Cougars to 12.8 points per game this season, shooting 41% from three. Washington State lost NBA prospect Cedric Howard, who followed Riley from Eastern and had averaged 17.7 points and 7 rebounds, to season-ending shoulder surgery, but so far has been able to survive that loss. This will probably be their toughest test without him, though.
Did UW not want Isaiah Watts?
I don't think he was considered that big time a recruit, but now it seems to be a guy who could contribute. So, maybe he'll transfer here after the year. Who knows?
It
It's always.
hasn't seemed to be the case, but
What do you mean?
of players transferring from Wazoo to UW.
I mean, there literally was a player who transferred from Wazoo to UW after being from Seattle.
Who?
Uh,
Yeah, I know the guy.
Isaiah Williams.
I know the guy you're
It all
talking
runs
about.
together at some point.
Yeah.
He was out of college basketball last year. Has shown up again this year. Noah Williams. Noah Williams from O'Day is who we're thinking of. He is now playing at James Madison, where he's averaging 1.9 points per game. All right, football. The transact continues.
It is funny how in football, like I was telling you this, like college football has kind of figured out accidentally. They've accidentally figured out a full calendar, right? They've got playoffs now. They've got a more interesting regular season. They've got transact in the offseason. Basically, every quarterback who's not set, even then, right? Almost every quarterback around the country is changing teams or getting money to stay where they are. And men's college basketball is just exactly the same. It is just as bad as it's ever been.
I mean,
Like,
they have tons of transact. I don't think that's the issue here.
it's
The tournament was already perfect. Like they can't
okay, fine.
change something.
They have one good weekend of 2 days. They have a Thursday and a Friday, and it's like women's college basketball is like the most important. Probably, maybe even basketball. There is like we've got that. We've got NCAA football, and then men's college basketball is a thing that is in between, where you're forgetting who Noah Williams is, and he transferred to James Madison.
It's true. It wasn't my finest hour. All right, Huskies transact. Should we start with the bad news or the good news?
Let's start with the bad news, of course.
Kamori House has submitted a notification of transfer. Played more snaps than any other true freshman for the Huskies last season. Jed Fish had talked about him as the future of the team on defense. Really became quite important, in situations where they needed more mobility from that middle linebacker position. And then you're losing your two starters at the position in Carson Bruner and Alfonso Tupatala. So he figured to be an even bigger part of the 2025 team. So it's certainly a position where they've got the potential to add players via transfer, but it's disappointing to not see Kamori House be part of this going forward. Jed Fish was asked about him after their pre-Sun Bowl practice on Tuesday. Didn't rule out the potential of players returning once they submit a notification of transfer, but also certainly did not make it sound likely. Like if you're hoping that this is just a case of him keeping his options open, doesn't sound like it.
Yeah, I'm fascinated the Kamori House piece because first off, this is basically like you could go through all the players who've submitted their notification of transfer or transferred, and you can kind of one by one be like, yeah, I get it, I understand, sure, fine. Kamori House is the first one where it's like, fuck, and I would be surprised if UW didn't have the money to bring back Kamori House.
Me too.
Or the resources to. I mean, there could be some massive amount of money that's out there, right? Obviously, the higher end money is going to quarterbacks as they are, but there are some schools like Ole Miss is definitely spending serious money in transfer portal right now. So if he ends up at a program like that, it'll be like, well, probably they just had extra dollars and went hard after Kamori House. Like, I get it for that purpose. And maybe UW just wanted to allocate that money in a slightly different way. Could also be, I mean, Jacob Manu star linebacker at Arizona. I think next year you could pretty naturally assume probably will be better than Kamori House this year. There's a lot of linebackers that you play though, and they definitely both could have been on the field at the same time. It could just be there's a chunk of money that they wanted Manu for, and that Jed Fish was like, this is our number one priority, and I I would be pretty surprised if he didn't transfer to UW, but you never know. Um, so I guess it'll be interesting to see how that one plays out. But I think Kamori House is probably not going to end up at a place where it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's fine. Seeing Cam Davis commit to Minnesota, it's like, great. That's a fine place for Cam Davis to be. I would expect that Kamori House, given the situation, either strangely ends up back at UW or ends up at a place like Ole Miss. I just feel like the SEC or a big program, and if he goes to Oregon, he's dead to us, to me.
He is not dead to us, to be clear, to me. It is funny, by the way, both UW players who I've seen commitments for so far as transfers have stayed within the Big Ten. You mentioned Cam Davis to Minnesota and then punter Jack McAllister to Nebraska. So that's another thing that, used to be pretty rare transfers within the conference because of the fact that teams had a lot of control over that process, and thankfully they no longer do. The other new player to submit a notification of transfer on scholarship was cornerback Darren Barkins, who had spent 2 years here after transferring from Oregon, and but had never really tracked the defensive depth chart and has 1 year of eligibility remaining, so not a real surprise there. All right, the good news. The players incoming to UW as transfers. We start with Kansas State tackle Carver Willis, a 6-year senior who started all 11 games he played last season at right tackle, started 7 games the year before that. Likely to start opposite Drew Azzopardi at tackle, though one of them will presumably have to move to left tackle after Azzopardi started at right tackle for the Huskies this season. You can comment individually or wait until the end?
I mean, I love any lineman, experienced lineman, a 6-year senior lineman. Bring it on.
I mean, you've now added 2 starting linemen via transfer, and that's a spot where clearly the Huskies needed a lot of immediate help. They've also got a lot of long-term help coming via the 2025 recruiting class. So a nice combination there, I think.
Did you quote long-term help when you said that?
Well, I mean, look, the odds of any individual player transferring are probably not that high. I mean, obviously not all of those offensive
We're
linemen
just
are going to
talking
stick
about
around.
a freshman who came, played a bunch in his freshman year, played well, and now is leaving the program. So
it's still the best way to have long-term help is to have players as freshmen. Western Michigan defensive tackle Ontario Thompson, who's an Iowa native who played 1 season at Iowa Western Community College, then 1 at Iowa before transferring to Western Michigan last year, where he started all 12 games at defensive tackle. Has 1 year of eligibility remaining. In an intriguing note, even though he didn't play much on defense with the Hawkeyes, he blocked a pair of punts there.
there we go.
That's a special skill he brings to the table. Also a defensive tackle, Utah's Samote Pepa, who is listed at 6'3", 340, so brings some serious size to the interior of the UW defensive line. He was a rotational player with the Utes, starting 1 game each of the last 3 seasons. Really promising as a redshirt freshman in 2022 when he had 6 tackles for a loss. Last season, he had a pair of tackles for loss against 2CU, but none the rest of the season. Limited a little bit by injuries. Didn't see a ton of playing time last season, but has a chance to see more for UW.
And I think the biggest thing that you'll note about these players is where they're at. And I think the biggest takeaway that you would have from this last season of where UW was lacking is obviously in the lines.
Yes.
And they just have to pummel the lines with as many players as they can, basically, in recruiting and transfer. That is what they have to do. Quarterback play is going to be fine. Quarterback play will be fine without Damon Williams. Quarterback play will be fine forever. They'll have receivers. They'll have running backs. That is an easy thing for a program like the University of Washington to get, is those types of players. The lines is where it matters, right? And that is what really, really matters to me about this program and how they're going to get to. It was actually funny watching the Seahawks game on Sunday. I was like, this feels like watching UW versus Penn State.
That is a
right
good
now.
point. That is a very reasonable point, the way that they got. I mean, not in the second half, because UW, the Seahawks defensive line did figure things out after halftime, but offensive line, it was a problem all game.
Just obliterated, right? And it was like, and obviously a team coming from the Midwest, right? From Big Ten country. And it was like, this is just a big boy line that is crushing us on both sides of the ball. So That is going to be the biggest difference between whether UW has success in the Big Ten long term is how much they build up those lines. Offensive line opens up everything else. I am. It's funny. Like I'm such an offensive line truther. It requires assets in college now and attention in a way that it maybe didn't in the past. But it's like as much as you could put to the offensive line, as many players as you can have there, that is when you should do it. And the time to do it is right now.
All right, this is one that I'm really excited about. Northern
too.
Arizona safety Alex McLaughlin played 2 years at Northern Arizona, leading the team in tackles and interceptions as a freshman and earning multiple FCS freshman All-America honors. Then had 5.5 sacks last season while finishing second on the team in tackles and earning all Big Sky first team honors unanimously. He's a 3-time Big Sky Defensive Player of the Week. Was originally a 3-star linebacker prospect. On Montlake noted that he had a scholarship offer from Jed Fish at Arizona, chose to go to Northern Arizona instead. And I'm really curious to see how the Huskies are going to use him because it sounds like someone who could be deployed in a variety of different ways depending on your needs.
This is awesome, and obviously such a Jed player, right? Like that he'd been around and kind of watching him when he was in Arizona obviously offered him. It was a pretty fun one, but he's somebody who's probably going to step in next year and be a contributor to the defense immediately.
Oh, it'd be very surprising if he wasn't, I would say. And yeah, I mean, I could see that him, I think primarily they are going to have a needed safety, but if you're playing kind of a big dime situation where he's like essentially serving as a linebacker, I think that's something he could potentially do, blitzing off the edge. Like there's all sorts of exciting possibilities here. And then the last one coming in Tuesday night, Utah Tech long snapper Ryan Kern. So the Huskies have lost its long snapper to transfer and now added a long snapper.
Which long snapper transferred?
Well, we got his name wrong last week, so I don't know. I don't know if I want to say it off
the transfer
off the top of
portal
my head.
giveth, the transfer portal taketh away.
This is how it works. This is how it works.
So far pretty good, I would say, in the transfer portal. I think the team is net better still, even with Kamori House, and
Oh yeah, I would say yes.
more to come.
Yeah, I don't think they're done right now. Caleb Johnston was the name of the long snapper who left.
What did you say wrong?
Well, I called him Cameron, I believe, because Cameron Warchuk was the name of their other long snapper last season.
Oh man. The goal is to get better in the portal than you were the previous year. And to
The goal is to get better than you were the previous year. Transfers are one way of doing that.
I think they have done that. I think people are being a tad dramatic about Kamori House. I just pulled up which you wouldn't believe this, the internet, a little dramatic about something.
Did they say the Huskies needed Kamori House?
Breaking news. They said
Kamori,
they should
Kamori
Kamori House, and it made no sense.
Kamori House reveals he's entered the transfer portal.
Kamori House was a good player. Like, he also was a freshman linebacker. Like, is he going to get better next year? Probably.
Very likely. I mean, I think his potential is very high. I think if he doesn't become an all-conference type player by the end of his career, I would be a little surprised. Now, is he going to be like, win the Butkus Award type good? Yeah, that's probably a little ridiculous for any player, not specific to Kamori House.
I mean, obviously, and what they were as a commit doesn't necessarily matter, but he's still only a year away from that. And Kamori House wasn't a massive commitment when he did. So,
I don't think that's surprising though. He's undersized. He's someone who is more about, I think, his mobility and his pattern recognition than, the physical tools that tend to be prioritized in recruiting. Which I think is one of the cool things about, the increased transfer mobility, which is what people mostly mean when they say portal, because it allows players like that to, get more credit than they got as recruits. All right, Seahawks.
It would be frustrating if Kamori House leaves. We just are not going to know the full amount of information, but I mean, yeah, I don't know.
Everyone
I-
has their own race to run.
I'm like, he's done 33 tackles, had the pick, forced a fumble. Like, I'm not gonna weep over Kamari House. People are like devastated, and you're like, wherever will we find these 33 tackles again? It would be the only thing that'd be frustrating is basically
Everyone
if
knows tackles are the ultimate
I
measure
know,
of
but I'm
football
just saying,
value.
like, yes, he's a freshman. There's a piece to it of like a promising young freshman is very exciting.
He's going to go to a big time program. Let's be clear.
No, Kamari House will go to a big time program. It's not marking his next 4 years or whatever, 3 years. The thing that would be frustrating is if it feels like UW couldn't afford to keep Kamari House here. And I think that would be the thing that's if they come in and they sign two good linebackers in the portal in the next couple of days, and there's a little bit of a combination of, well, I could go make some money and the playing time is not as obvious. I think that makes more sense. I just want UW. I feel like they haven't opened up the bank massively yet right now. And I do think there is more money there that is able to be spent by UW in the portal, if that makes sense. But it could be Jacob Manu's a big time player, right? Takario Davis, right? Takario Davis hasn't committed anywhere else, has he?
I don't think so.
Like, these are players that are going to require real money, like, and so if they're saving that money and being like, this is somebody we need to really work to try to sign and pay hefty to try to sign, then that's a difference, and it might be that the choice is made to try to spend on Jacob Manu rather than spending on Kamari House. And in a 1-year situation, if you're looking at it that way, which reasonably speaking, you probably should view college football players as a 1-year situation, I don't think you should just view it as you're signing them for, like, yes, having Kamari House back this next year would be nice, but Kamari House could just leave after next year. And if Jacob Manu is going to be a better player in the 2025 season, then probably should go there and find somebody else after that, I guess is what I'm saying. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Also, dear God, please sign Takario Davis.
Jacob Manu was about the exact equivalent recruit as Kamari House.
Like, in considered the portal or undergrad?
Undergrad.
Okay.
Also similar size profile. Very, very similar players, I would say, generally speaking.
Here, let me read you a headline I just Googled. Oregon football transfer needs include Takario Davis.
All right, do we need to talk about the Seahawks?
No, we should. We should talk about the Seahawks.
I don't know if we should talk about the Seahawks. It wasn't great last weekend. You were there. Do you still want to rant about this? You were feeling a type of way on Sunday night.
Oh, I was so hot. And then I told you after, I was like, I'm not going to not be angry by Tuesday.
I did specifically predict that you would lose your steam.
Well, I haven't lost my steam.
Oh,
No,
wow.
No, I kind of have. There's just the Seahawks this is a bad fandom. And the Seahawks fandom is the most privileged fandom in the entire world. It's like they won one fucking Super Bowl.
Wow.
And we act like it's like mission accomplished, right? I don't understand what happened in the time period that I have had Seahawks season tickets, the atmosphere at the games, and I understand what you're saying about the accessibility of getting other tickets. It was possible before.
But like, you've just never been to. When have you ever been to a sporting event not in Seattle involving a Seattle sports team?
Every other city is 80% fans of the other team.
I don't
that
think it was
is not
80%
true.
fans. But I think there's a lot of
Packers
situations.
Fans showed up from one of the tiniest fucking markets in the country.
But
I get it, they're the Packers, but it was a pathetic showing. I was there. There were a lot of Packers. The Fail Mary game, there were a lot of Packers fans. I'm not saying that there weren't a lot of Packers fans. This was different. And this is after the Seahawks.
Because their team was like super successful, so they had a lot to cheer for.
Have they not been super successful now? You're saying right now?
No, I'm saying during the
Then-
game they were super successful.
No, there were more of them. This was the most Packers fans that there have
It
ever
probably
been. At a
is. I'm
Packers
just
game.
telling you, like,
This is
the
a
ratio-
bad. It is a bad fan base. You can't argue with me against that.
I mean, I'm not going to argue it's a good fan base. What would be the argument for that?
Really, it was like a born on
by
third
the way-
base fan base.
By the way,
And
I mean, not really. It was they showed up after the team had moved to third base. The team advanced, and then all the fans came
They
and
weren't even
went
born
to
there.
third base.
there are so many fans that are
Packers
like,
fans were
and
born on
also,
third base.
I'm fucking sick of the Seahawks talking about how loud it is at the stadium and it not being loud. It's like, maybe shut the fuck up about how great the atmosphere is. They had a whole presentation at halftime, a drone show, which I'm weirdly pro drone shows, but they're majestic. But
What about over the tri-state area?
fine with it.
You understand?
The
You know about
truth
the
will
story,
come out
right?
about this someday. Anyway, there's actually nothing that I am less interested in than news reports about drones. But they have an entire thing talking about how loud this fan base is when they're showing it to like 6,000 Seahawks fans in the building. When Seahawks fans started cheering, I was actually shocked that there were that many Seahawks fans around to cheer. It was a pathetic showing by the fans. And there's a reality that this fan base, they win one Super Bowl. I don't know. Maybe it was the pick, right? Like maybe it was Super Bowl 49 happened and it broke everybody. Because it feels like it broke everybody involved with the team, and maybe it broke the entire fan base. Maybe our whole faith in football was lost in that point. But it is pathetic.
Are we broken?
How little they showed up. We're the only ones who are not broken. Thank you.
I mean, I wasn't there at the game.
I should not be there being yelled at for standing up or whatever. And we don't even fucking try anymore, right? Like, it is so sad how this fan base has transformed from being a once very good NFL fan base to me being like, obviously I'm not in every stadium, but they're on the same level as the Cardinals and the Rams to me right now, right? Like the 49ers, they have fans. The Seahawks probably do travel a little bit, but those motherfuckers are not buying tickets here and they're not coming to games. So many people are selling these tickets, and it literally comes down to capitalism. And that's the thing. Everything comes down to capitalism in the end. And that's the thing that I fucking hate about it, because literally they could stop this whole process from happening. The Seahawks could do it. I don't know what mechanism Steve Ballmer is using
we've talked about it,
or how much it's happening there, but like the Seahawks are complicit. The Seahawks are complicit.
What Steve Ballmer is doing is relocating fans within the arena from one section to another so that a specific section of the arena can be Clippers specific. Now, if you took all the Seahawks fans were in the stadium on Sunday and put them all in the Hawks Nest, I'm pretty sure the Hawks Nest would be pretty full.
They're like ads for Ticketmaster after the game, and it's like all of these people are complicit in how horrible of an environment it is to be at these games, right? The worst part about it is Packers fans kind of friendly, but they were like, "Oh, excuse me, I thought I'd hop down a row and just like get by here or whatever," and they're like, but on my knee, and we're like, okay. People like there are people lounging in front of it. Chris was going nuts about it. Chris was like, I can't imagine going into another stadium and just like laying across 3 seats and being so casual about it. But there is a reality that Seahawks fans are they're bad. They're a bad fan base. They are not loud. The stadium is not a loud stadium at all. They don't cheer that well. There's on defense. It means nothing. The team sucks at home also, and they've sucked at home for years at this point. Lumen Field means nothing. The Seahawk fan base means nothing. Playing a game here is not scary. We might as well be the fucking Chargers. It sucks. And it's horrible to be at. And all of the people on the internet who always think that the grass is greener, who are asking for Sam Howell, got what they fucking wanted. I'm waiting for the time when the fan base comes back, and I don't think it will. I've lost faith in the Seahawks fans forever.
It didn't go great with Sam Howell.
It was, honestly, I think I've said this multiple times this year. It might have been the worst Seahawks game I've ever been to.
Sam Howell, there were 19 dropbacks after he took over for Geno Smith. At least I don't think there were any on the final drive. So I think that was the sum total. They netted out 5 yards for the Seahawks. Just not ideal. Not how you want to go offensively. I mean, we've talked about this before. The research suggests that quarterbacks play better when they have a full week of practice before a start rather than being thrust in relief. We did see that, I think, eventually with Geno Smith when he replaced Russell Wilson as the backup quarterback in 2021. Uh, Still, the bar was set so low that it does seem for the Seahawks to have a realistic chance of winning this weekend. They need to have Geno Smith, and that's where the news has been good this week. Mike McDonald said Monday, "We're fortunate. A lot of positive, optimistic signs coming out of the tests. Geno's a beast, man. He's in here working out in the morning, working through it. I know he's still feeling it, but this guy's tough as nails, and hopefully we'll see him practice throughout the week with optimism and him being ready for the game." So you feeling good about the Vikings game now?
No, I feel good about nothing.
Uh,
The reality is the Packers average look, I think that Packers team is very good.
I mean, they were number 3 in DVOA coming into that game, and then they got way better.
They got way better in DVOA.
Yeah, like they haven't had the full DVOA update, but if you look at the playoff odds and which has their weighted DVOA, I think they're comfortably ahead of Detroit. They are even with Philadelphia and ahead of Buffalo. So they are now number 1 in the NFL in weighted DVOA.
Okay, so they're hypothetically the best team in the NFL, and that's what they looked like in this game. But the yards per play, like you said, that the Seahawks defense figured it out in the second half. Still at 6 yards per play, and I don't know what the first half was versus the second half. It wasn't a huge difference, though.
It was over 7 in the first half. Because there was
So
a
it
point
went
I
from
looked.
really bad to just bad.
Yeah, there was a
I,
point I looked at it, and the differential was like 7.5 to 5.3. This is pre-Geno injury, obviously.
I think the Packers are really good. They are a significantly better team, I think, than the Vikings are, and statistically,
We'll
I think
discuss
that's
that
the
in a
case as
second.
well. But I get that they were down pretty significantly once Geno is injured. I think Ryan Grubb might be bad at this right now, and like the reality that Ryan Grubb is not back next year is still quite high. Uh, there the amount of dropbacks that Sam Howell had, like the information that you're talking about, we're all aware of the information that quarterbacks who are coming in mid-game are not very successful. And they chose basically not to run the ball at all, which
The only run before the final drive was the Zach Charbonnet touchdown.
it was a little baffling. Like I'm probably the least likely to want to criticize Ryan Grubb in any way, but it was a little strange how they approached Sam Howell coming into the game, that they basically didn't change the game plan at all, as far as I can tell. Sam Howell is somebody who's playing again behind a bad and an injured offensive line, who also takes a ton of sacks. Like this was not the kind of game to just let Sam Howell throw. And he did his couple of completions that were okay, where he was looking to dump off everything, right? He wasn't getting the ball downfield. But if you could have hypothetically set up some shorter yardage situations, I think that would have been a little bit helpful. And they did none of it. You know, like I don't
It
want
would
to
have
say
been hard to be worse.
they didn't wave the white flag, because that's kind of the exact opposite of what they did.
Correct.
But they maybe should have balanced those things a little bit more, right? You agree with this?
Yeah. I mean, they needed to run the ball more.
Uh,
By the way, the Green Bay's yards per play ended up their 10th best out of 14 games this season.
wow, that is wild. First off, that's just a really fucking good offense.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess credit to the Seahawks, I suppose, for losing 30-13 in this game. The third down sacks are brutal, and this was even a problem with Geno as well. The red zone play is still brutal. I thought that Ryan Grubb might have figured something out the previous week in Arizona, and it was one of those things where it was just like after the first 2 drives, I was like, the game's over. Like we could just see that this team is so significantly better. And in Arizona, they scored that touchdown in the first series, and it was like, okay, that's fine. Like we'll be back. This game, they scored that touchdown. The Seahawks give the ball back. I think they came down and scored right again, right?
Correct.
And it was just like, the game's done. Like, we knew it. You'd be lying if you didn't know it, you know? It was like the 3rd and 4, and then Geno sacked, and I was like, honestly, like in that moment, the second Geno is sacked and Packers fans were going nuts, and 3rd down is louder for the Packers than it was for the Seahawks at any point during the game. And I knew the game was over. And I on it, like, you always hold a kernel of hope, but
I think I'm more. I think this game was closer with Geno Smith healthy than you do. I guess I would say. I mean, until Geno threw that interception, like
just brutal Geno throw. Like, look, the reality is the Seahawks should be thanking the Lord for Geno Smith existing, but also sometimes, look, wouldn't trade Geno for anything, but
I would trade Geno for some things, just not backup quarterbacks, except
Not
for maybe
Sam
Jake
Howell.
Browning. Yeah, I mean, if they score a touchdown in that situation, and this is presumably part of his thinking, you're down 2 touchdowns, you're forcing it a little, but they were never like, 1st and goal at the 1 or anything. It was, what was it? It was first, it was 3rd and 9 at the 12 when he got intercepted. Yeah, I mean, so they're probably looking at settling for a field goal, but you're going to be down 17-6 maybe going to halftime. I mean, Green Bay would have had plenty of time to kick the field goal that they did anyway before the end of the half, but it's a little bit different a game. It's still a two-score game. You're getting the ball first out of the half.
Let me just explain this in terms of college football, like I was saying before, though, which was UW plays Penn State. Penn State, I think, punted at one point, right?
I don't
Possibly.
think they did.
Maybe
Did
they didn't
they?
punt all game. Uh, if the game had become closer, Green Bay just would have scored more. Like,
Probably. I'm not as convinced of it as you are.
the defense ended up being okay. It felt like they ended up making a couple of plays. Leonard Williams, right? Like, Leonard Williams is the defense for all intents and purposes last week, but like, they got a lucky fumble to keep it even slightly closer than it was, right? Uh, and Leonard Williams makes the massive tackle to force the previous punt. But like, beyond that, and then Matt LaFleur at the end of the first half, I was like, wow, Matt LaFleur's going for the kill shot. I was like, since when did Matt LaFleur have balls when he sent out the offense? And then, of course, it was nothing. In that situation, can you tell me if I'm wrong about this? There was 4 seconds left on the clock. They're at the 4-yard line, I want to say. He sends out the offense, trying to draw the defense off sides. And I'm like, would you have then gone for it if you drew it off sides? Or are you wasting our fucking time right
It's a
now?
great question. I mean, I think maybe they would have, what they were hoping is to get a free play out of it. And then if you hadn't scored the touchdown, you would have been able to kick the field goal by taking the penalty.
I
Maybe
guess
that's the
so.
galaxy brain logic. I mean, look, if anyone knows about free plays, it's the Green Bay Packers.
I understand that, but I think that's going to fall under wasting our fucking time. Because when I saw that, I was just
agree
like,
with that assessment.
send out your offense, dude. Like, run a play. Come on, Matt LaFleur. Anyway, they didn't need to. But they just would have scored more. They are just better. Like,
Penn
that
State
is
did not punt. I just don't think it was like I don't think that the reason that the offense fell off for Green Bay in the second half was solely because they were like, you know, taking it is shifting into a lower gear. I mean, I think the Seahawks do have a very good defense. And I don't think that what happened in the first quarter is necessarily going to completely change my perspective on that. So I'm more optimistic about this one than you are. But
you
yeah,
weren't
the
there.
offense.
There was nothing to be optimistic about. Really, they tried to give us the game too. They tried so hard. You know, like there was between the fumble and then, I mean, it was only a 10-point game at that point, right? Between the
was.
fumble, if
The
I kept
Seahawks got
every
the ball
series
back down 23-13 with
just being like,
10
Gino,
minutes left.
come out. Come on, Gino. If you're well enough to play this week, why, Gino?
I mean, well enough to play this week is very different than well enough to play in that game. It may
I
involve a
know.
brace on the knee
I
for
know.
stability. You never know.
It was just, you saw Sam Howell come out and then he threw that pick and I was just like, we're leaving. I'm not sitting through the rest of this.
You actually left?
Yeah. After Sam Howell threw that pick, I was like, I had to get on the fucking train. I was not trying to ride a train with all those Packers fans. Anyway, small fan base coming up this next week.
Some other injury notes. Oluwatimi is day to day. He was replaced by undrafted rookie Jalen Sundell after leaving this one. Sundell actually showed some good things, I think, in the run game. Probably not as effective as a pass blocker,
How could you
which
tell?
there was a play where he pulled
On,
really well.
on run play? It's kind of crazy to be criticizing the team for not running enough, but like Charbonnet ran 8 times.
Ken Walker the third still TBD for this weekend. I don't think his absence had much of anything to do with this game. Charbonnet ran well when he got opportunities. Uh, the line for Sunday opened Seahawks +4.5 is now down to Seahawks +3, presumably due to that more positive Geno outlook. Still suggests Minnesota about 5.5 points better on a neutral field, although maybe they're taking down the home field for the Seahawks at this point. Vegas should know by now, you would think. So why aren't people talking about the Vikings as a more legit contender? Their 12-2 record is tied for second best in the NFL. Now tied top the NFC North with the Lions losing to the Bills. They've got a 7-game winning streak. Their plus 117 differential is fourth in the NFL. Like, this has all the markers of a really good team. Uh, I think it's interesting they have just 2 wins this season against teams who are better than 500. They have multiple wins against 500 teams, but only 2 against better than 500 teams. So this would actually be only their third of the season if they beat the Seahawks.
Were those the Texans and the Packers?
Did they beat the Packers?
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, that might have been Malik Willis, but
I don't think so. I thought Malik Willis was perfect as a starter.
yeah, Jordan Love.
Yeah.
32 of 54 for 389 yards.
The other thing I think that people are looking at is from week 8 through week 13, they weren't real great. They had just one win by more than 8 points in that span, and it was against a pretty weak schedule. I mean, the
Yeah,
Cardinals
that's
no
what I'm
longer
saying.
look
It's like
strong.
this win streak you're talking about, hosting the Colts at the Jags. I think that was in London, and they probably should have lost, right? At the Titans, at the Bears. I get there are some road games in there, but then Cardinals, Falcons, Bears again. Like the Seahawks in that stretch, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games are probably 5-2, 6-1 in those games. I mean, they literally have beaten many of these teams. So,
Well, we'll see at Chicago next week.
I mean, the Bears do not look good right now.
But I think it's the last 2 weeks that beating the Falcons by 3 touchdowns, beating the Bears by 18. Like those are more impressive wins than we were seeing when you're winning 30-27 at Chicago in overtime.
Okay, so you're looking at the score of that Vikings Bears game because I saw none of it. For some reason, I don't Monday night. I just watched literally not for some reason.
I was a little confused by the tweets. I didn't realize it was a double Monday Night Football game, but I was watching basketball. There's not a lot of NBA on this week.
I was visiting Santa Claus,
Hmm.
but
Which
I
Santa Claus?
I looked up the game at Kent Station. I pulled it up. Caleb was pretty bad, but I was just like, okay, look at Sam Darnold, 24-40, 231 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. That is a pretty that's a worse game than Geno played against. We're not Sam Howell territory, but it's not a good game that he played. Aaron Jones, 18 carries, 86 yards. Pretty good, but not incredible. And then I pulled it up and I was like, okay, let me just figure out what happened.
Yeah, because
So
Minnesota only outgained Chicago 329-284. There was a turnover apiece. Yeah, it's a little perplexing.
So the Bears were aggressive. 4th and 1 from the 39. Didn't pick it up first series of the game. Field goal. Fumbled on the next series when they were driving. Touchdown for the Packers or for the Vikings. A punt after that. Another turnover on downs for the Bears. End of the half. Punt, field goal, punt, touchdown, end of game. And also I believe the Vikings had a blocked punt as well, or had a punt blocked. But the Bears went for a couple of 4th downs that they didn't pick up early. I get that can be devastating. One of which put the Vikings in a very good position. They fumbled the ball, and they just couldn't make up the deficit after that. Like the Vikings didn't necessarily win this game as much as the Bears kind of lost this game overall. This is not like the Seahawks-Packers game where you look at it and you're like, there's clearly one team that dominated overall. And I think that's why people are not taking the Vikings more seriously. Also, statistically, they're not at the same level as those other teams.
Yeah, I mean, their schedule doesn't rate as bad as you might think, partially because of the fact that, you're just playing enough good teams in the NFC North that's
They
going to
they
lift it up.
managed to be in the hardest division and also not play that many hard games somehow.
Well, I mean, part of it is because they have Green Bay at Detroit are their final two games of the season.
Yes, or they haven't yet.
Yeah,
But
so that's part of it. I mean, you know, who who knows how good the Seahawks are, but they're probably their third hardest road game. If I'm looking at this, the Rams, I guess, were their third hardest road game, but the Seahawks do have a better point differential than the Rams.
so they're in that territory. What is the non-adjusted DVOA? Uh,
I don't think we can see it anymore.
I don't know if this is updated. The non-adjusted VOA or whatever is in the territory with like Denver, Pittsburgh, Houston, uh, terribly far behind Green Bay, but it's pretty clear that the class of the league is something like Detroit, Buffalo, Philadelphia, Green Bay, maybe Baltimore. And then there's that next tier of teams.
Baltimore
And
is number one in yards per play. Did you realize that ahead of Minnesota?
Minnesota's number 2 in yards per play.
I'm sorry, ahead of Green Bay.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
there's no way that's the
that would
case.
have been shocking information. I mean, Sam Darnold's stats are better than you think, in part
I'm not
because
saying they're bad stats, but I'm just saying the Green Bay team that we saw is possibly the best team in the NFL.
I agree
saw
that
it with
they're better than the Vikings.
the 2 best teams we've seen this year has both come at home, and Buffalo, it was a complete domination. The Seahawks team was bad at that point, but that was a complete domination. And I saw that Green Bay game basically as complete domination by Green Bay as well. Minnesota is not as good as those teams are. So it gives me a glimmer of hope. And it really comes down to is how healthy is Geno Smith overall? Seems like a lot of positive trends toward Geno playing, but
Is he at
there's
100%?
there's
he
a
have
huge
mobility?
difference. Sometimes I wish he'd run a little bit more, but
Agreed.
Minnesota is not as good of a team as Green Bay. We always knew that this was the easier one of these 2 games.
Yeah. I do think people are underrating Darnold a little bit. He obviously wasn't expected to start necessarily. Number 10 pick JJ McCarthy gets injured in the preseason, season-ending knee surgery, but he's completing 68% of his passes, a career high for 8.3 yards per attempt, also a career high. He's number 8 in EPOA plus CPOE composite, just ahead of Jordan Love. One of the things that's not necessarily coming up in the raw stats, that's also part of the reason that they were able to control the game on Monday night. Pass interference has been a big thing in the Vikings' favor. I mean, with the receivers they have, that's going to be a big storyline, especially after the way that Reek Woolen in particular and Josh Jobe as well struggled against the Packers receivers and committed multiple pass interference penalties in that one.
Some of those are just complete bullshit.
No, they weren't.
The one on the sideline where it was an underthrow, that was not even close to a pass interference.
I thought it was pass interference.
Did you?
I don't think there was even a lot of conversation about it in the Discord.
No, we're talking on a different one. Not the one at like the 4-yard line at the end of the first half. There was one later on where Love just threw it up. Jordan Love is a better quarterback than Sam Darnold. I don't give a fuck what the stats say.
I agree that he's a better quarterback.
And maybe it was just that game in particular. He's unsackable. He's under pressure, just drops off almost perfect passes constantly, right? There were a few that didn't go the right way. The real issue is that they didn't run the ball that well, but like Jordan Love is a significantly better. I'm more confident about Leonard Williams getting to Jordan Love than I am about, or getting to Sam Darnold than I was about him getting to Jordan Love.
His sack rate is 6th highest in the NFL, and he will still throw picks. He's throwing interceptions on 2.6% of attempts, which is about the same as Geno Smith this season. I mean, yeah, Jordan Love is significantly better than Sam Darnold. I think we can agree with that. The Packers receiving core is not as good as the Vikings receiving core. This might be the best receiving duo in the NFL right now. Justin Jefferson might be the guy in the NFL. And then Jordan Addison is also over 10 yards per target. There are 7 total players in the NFL averaging at least 10 yards per target with at least 70 targets this season, and the Vikings have 2 of them. Everyone else in the league has 5. They have 2. Think about that.
Okay.
But targets to just about everybody have been efficient, including a team-high 60% success rate for tight end TJ Hawkinson, who's had 23 of his 32 catches go for first downs. So he's certainly someone to keep an eye on third down situations. They're just 23rd in rushing EPA per play. Some of that is definitely back up Ty Chandler, who's averaging just 3.4 yards per carry. Starter Aaron Jones is at 4.6, but Yeah, so far Aaron Jones going to Minnesota seems to have worked out for everybody in the NFC North. The real key to this Vikings team, though, is still their defense. They're number 2 in defensive EPA per play after finishing 17th last season in Brian Flores' first year as defensive coordinator, when they really started out quite strong with his blitz-heavy philosophy, but struggled later in the season. They're third against dropbacks, number 1 against runs. And a big part of that, like if you look at their completion percentage, their yards per attempt, even the net yards per attempt with sacks, it's all pretty middling, but they lead the NFL with 20 interceptions, including 6 from our old friend Byron Murphy. So not great news if Sam Howell plays quarterback.
Oh God.
They do have a pair of strong edge rushers in Jonathan Greenard and Andrew Van Ginkel, who have combined for 20 sacks. They are both top 20 in pass rush win rate. Greenard is also top 10 in run stop win rate, and the Vikings rank third overall in both win rates on defense during last week. So this is a fearsome defense facing an offense that has not been so fearsome. So the
Okay.
Seahawks defense is going to need a great week. In addition to the Seahawks defense should have a great week. In addition to a healthy GM.
That's your need is wrong. This is the wrong thing. Should implies that you expect them to.
It's actually in situations where
You need
we're
more
talking
like
about
would like.
indecisions.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, no, that sounds great. I'm just gonna be totally honest. It all sounds horrible. No, I think the thing that they could have going for them is turnovers, right? The Packers did end up with a turnover, but you know, I'm going to reframe the game a little bit from how I felt because it felt horrible the entire time. If Gino was in and the Seahawks got the ball back down 23-13, it would have felt like there was like the chances of them getting a field goal in that situation are probably fairly high.
Yes.
With Gino. So maybe it wasn't as they weren't in my opinion, they were not winning that game no matter what.
But, I mean, if you look at like the last touchdown pass, that was Romeo Dobbs, right? Who got that coming off his concussion with very little separation.
I was like had just walked to the corridor.
With very little separation against Devin Witherspoon. Like that was oh yeah, we can do this anytime we want. We're just better than you. That if you're looking for what your argument of the game, your theory of the game, that play was that.
I still think they probably could have. And there were some moments where like they sold out so aggressively against the run, and then Jordan Love pulled it back with the RPO and hit a wide open receiver for 10 yards. It was I still think if they wanted to, they could have scored more in that game. But they're like Ichiro. They don't hit home runs because they're just not interested. Not interested in scoring more. The hope that you would have for the Seahawks is if Sam Darnold, if they can get some turnovers, can get pressure, because those are the situations that things are going to be better for them, is putting them in negative situations. It happened a couple of times for the Packers, and like getting hold calls, stuff like that, or getting to Sam Darnold. Like they didn't sack Jordan Love a single time all game, right? Considering how good of a game Leonard Williams had, that didn't happen. If they could just pick up a few things that are a little bit more negative for the opponent on defense, I guess, considering if we look at that moment where it was 23-13, the Seahawks were in the game. They were playing a better team than the Vikings are. Sam Howell wasn't a quarterback, and the defense did not play a good game at that point. If you take a week later and you're saying to yourself, the Vikings are a worse team than the Packers are, Gino hopefully will be back, maybe that's a winning combination. And their offense is not as good as the Packers' offense is. So maybe the defense can do some things. Do I think that's possible? Sure. Do I think it's likely? Probably not. We need to see it mode from this team right now. And I guess we can also take away, if that was the 10th best performance by the Packers offense against that Seahawks defense, you would probably, I guess, say that's a pretty good performance for them overall, right? And
obviously they're not playing the entire NFL, so it's not like it's for the best in the NFL necessarily, but it's a reasonably good performance.
I don't want to just throw out the Vikings games recently, but like it's been a pretty easy slate for a pretty good chunk of time. So I think that's why people are not taking the Vikings quite as seriously.
I mean, the other thing we should probably say is like, look, both advanced stats and Vegas had been lower on the Seahawks than we were for several weeks, and they'd been wrong for several weeks. And last week they were very right.
Yeah, but Geno Smith was also injured. Like,
But even before that, because I mean, you said 50-50, I think. I said a little bit better than 50-50 based on the Seahawks track record against teams from the Central and Eastern time zones in primetime games, which got pretty badly obliterated. Like, no, even the losses that they had to those teams in primetime games in the Pete Carroll era, they were very close. It was nothing this lopsided before.
I was actually thinking about, like, I was looking at the games and I was like, there are a lot of home dogs this last weekend. And I think they all did pretty bad overall. Usually those home dogs, I'm kind of like, those teams I feel like are going to end up playing better than the spread. And where was that one? I think the Rams or the Niners were probably favorites, but Browns were home dogs, got crushed. Titans were home dogs, got crushed. Saints they only lost by a point. Obviously, they didn't get crushed. Giants were and lost by 21. Panthers were actually home favorites and lost by 16. Jags probably, I don't even know about Jags Jets, but the who else would have been? Chargers. No, Chargers would have been favorites too, and also got crushed by the Bucks. So it was only a few games, I guess. But the home dogs did not do as well last week. I think none of them won, as far as I can tell. Right? The Saints probably covered the spread, but none of the home underdogs actually won those games, and that's a little surprising to me in a week when there are a handful.
All right, after all that, percentage chances of victory?
36%.
I was going to say 35%. So we're in the same ballpark here.
I'm way more. Tristan unveils that he's way more optimistic.
Tristan says, you need to be optimistic about this game.
I mean, I will always have a glimmer of hope going into the situation. It is very hard being beaten at home so many times and just kind of feeling like this doesn't matter.
Wait, have I told you, by the way, my theory that leagues are screwing up by not having more home field? Like, I think leagues think it's a good thing to not have home field because the games are more fair. But this is fucking sports, man. Fair is only part of it. This is entertainment. And although as much as you may lament the number of Packers fans out there are still more Seahawks games at games in Seattle than Packers fans. It is good for the product to have the home team win. I will go to my grave believing this.
But how? Like, what is, like, you think that refs should be more favorable?
Wackier rules? I don't know. Different things to
don't get me started on wacky.
incentives.
My perspective about wacky baseball rules is not popular.
Oh, like you're anti?
No, I'm very pro.
Okay, yeah, no. The more anti those rules that baseball fans are, the more it makes me pro.
Yeah.
It only feeds the fire. They need to enact the golden at bat rule.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but like, people who don't want the golden at bat want less interesting baseball. I'm like, if you want to enjoy the product that you're watching, I just imagine like the ninth inning and you're like, well, Dylan Moore's up. It is going to be like, it'll extend the games are already kind of fast. It's not like it like makes the game a lot longer, but if you're going into the ninth and you have those moments where you're just like, like, I just wish we had it slightly different. The amount of exciting moments that you're going to get. The best part about baseball is the end of the game when there's a really good pitcher against a really good hitter. I can tell you there was a World Baseball Classic that we recall, right? Shohei versus Mike Trout, right? It's a notable moment. Are there any other notable moments from the World Baseball Classic? And people are like, well, it's amazing because it happened because of the alchemy of baseball, right? And it's just like, we can actually make this happen. None of this shit matters, right?
And then when people are like, well, it's like an arbitrary rule. It's like all the rules are arbitrary, man.
They didn't let
None of these
black
came down on
players
stone tablet.
into the MLB for a long time. Like, I'm not so concerned with the sanctity of old baseball, if that makes sense.
I don't know how we got here, but I like it.
No, I guess I'm for. I'm not sure about these wacky football rules.
I haven't thought them through yet. I'm just saying. You know, you get an extra possession or something. I don't know. Maybe you get the possession first on both halves.
Wow, that's
Why?
kind of a good idea.
Why do we have to have a coin toss? What's mandating that?
Nothing's mandating anything.
Exactly.
Wow,
Now,
getting
free your mind.
the ball
I-
first in both halves. This is like my rule, whereas like the amount for a first down should change depending on how far down you are.
It's actually
Which-
a pretty good idea,
Um,
but it's kind of confusing to do in practice. My rule is pretty simple. I've got to hand
how
it
is
to
that
myself.
confusing to do? If
If,
you're
like,
down by
the-
X amount of points,
But like
what's
the
less
chains,
confusing?
the chains are changing.
They can't have longer chains.
I don't know, but I'm saying it's right.
The
for-
idea that
you
we
don't-
have chains is the crazier
You
part.
watched a whole season. You've watched a lot of college football. You watched a whole season of Big Ten football. You think the referees are going to get those correct?
It's not that complicated. I mean, you probably could remove the chains from the sport completely. I'm not gonna lie.
I mean, I suppose you probably could do that, but I'm just saying something's going to get screwed up.
Did you hear? They're gonna have drone umpires next year.
Wait, are there?
No, I don't.
Oh, okay. It's plausible enough that I would believe it. We unveiled our wacky rules to fix football. You already fixed soccer. Why shouldn't we fix football and
Yeah,
baseball
I
too?
can't even remember what my soccer fix is.
I believe it was stop the clock. On that note,
Stop the clock. I'm still for it. Whatever the rule was, whatever I said, I stand by all takes, even if they conflict with each other. Thanks for listening.
especially if they conflict with each other. Thanks.
Do we have to say happy holidays? No. What we should say the schedule coming up.
Oh yeah. So we will plan a weekly pod next Monday, and then yeah, I guess the year in review podcast we're planning to drop on New Year's Day. So ideally new pods, weekly pods each of the next 2 Mondays, and then New Year's Day, the year in review.
We need to drop it on New Year's Day.
We're going to unveil our bold predictions for 2025. All right, bye.
Seattle Sports Figure of the Year. Wacky rule changes.
Really, it's not going to be the 12s.
Gaining a lot of stamps. No, it is not. I assure you, losing to the Giants at home, the 12s get no credit. Thanks for listening. It's so funny to me how like stupid things from movies sometimes end up being when you're like, you're the host now. You're the host now. Do you know what that's from?
Well, there's two options there. Because it could be, depending on the way you enunciate it, it could be, you're the man now, dog. Or it could be, I guess the other one I was thinking of is, I'm the captain now. So I guess
thought
it
you were
has to
doing
be that.
Finding Forrester, Sean Connor.
Yeah, that's, you're the man now, dog.
You're the man now, dog. It's just so funny that like this random Finding Forrester.
I mean, look, House was a very successful TV show that went on for a long period of time. Incredible, by all accounts, TV show. I never watched it. But anytime you mention the show House to me, I am only going to think of, you're risking a patient's life.
That's what everything gets boiled down to. I didn't even know that was like a thing.
Oh, among other things, it is immortalized, I'm pretty sure, in Bill Simmons' book on the Red Sox title, Now I Can Die in Peace. So
That's hilarious. Wait, did
which
you
I-
listen to? I gotta look up the name of this movie because I listened to the entire podcast about it and I still don't even know what it's called.
I
Hold
mean, the
on.
answer is no then.
Um,
Unless you're asking about, have I recently re-listened to the rewatchables Home Alone?
Home
And then
Alone.
the
I
answer
was
is yes.
I was actually literally I was thinking of that earlier today, where I was like Mina being on the Home Alone rewatchables. It's a re-listenable every year.
Oh, 100%.
Okay,
I
but no,
listened to it before watching Home Alone this past week, and it was great to like know what I was getting into.
disclosure with Van and Waz, and Big Waz needs to be on more of these podcasts.
Look, you're getting no disagreement from me on why.
Again, the Waz Van pairing was freaking incredible. But like,
disclosure is that's not the Oh, it is the
electronic music duo. Or what?
no, Michael Douglas and Demi Moore. Okay, which is set
See,
in Seattle. Number
yeah,
one.
wow, you know a lot more
Number
information about
two,
Disclosure than I did.
I read the book of this
What?
when I was too young to have read the book.
Are you
really.
joking? You read a book that wasn't What They Don't Teach You at Harvard
Why?
Business School by Mark H. McCormack? I was under the impression that that was book to you.
I took a brief break from reading What They Don't Teach You at Harvard Business
Harvard
School by
Business
Mark H. McCormack. I can't remember who made the joke, but there's also a What They Teach You at Harvard Business School. And so the joke is if you read these two books, you will know all information there is in the universe. It's a terrific joke. I don't know why I read that particular book, but
That's
I sure
so
did.
crazy. So Woz was like, he's like, bring the people of Seattle love the Sonics, man. And he was like, they still love the Sonics. And I was like, is Woz thinking of ESPN senior writer Kevin Pelton when he says this? Or do you think Woz has other Seattle frame of references that he's thinking of first?
I mean, look, Woz has a diverse set of friends and associates. I'm sure that there are other Sonics fans that he knows, but if you were like, hey, Woz, name someone who loves the Seattle Sonics, I got to think I'm a good bet to be number one there.
The very poster that's behind you. Anyway, I thought that was kind of funny. But no, Woz just like on there. I was like, damn, he fucking showed up for this. That wasn't where I intended to go, though. I'm excited to deliver these Mariners hot takes. First off, I think they're pretty good hot takes. Second off, we haven't had hot takes in so long.
So you're going to have people after they've listened to the hot takes. Even after the hot takes have become cool over the course of the remainder of the pod, they've been sitting out. They've been on the windowsill cooling. Then you're going to tell them how excited you were to deliver the hot takes.
Hot
At
takes,
the end of the
cool
after
treats.
the pod. You don't want to let the hot takes sit out too long on the windowsill. Then they might start to go bad.
I worked back up, you know what I mean? It was like the Decemberists recording the King of Dead. It was like a return to form, right? It was one of those, I was like, this is like an old school hot take from like early era before I knew anything about baseball. Hot takes.
This reminds me of one of my favorite Chuck Klosterman jokes, which is there's a 38 special album called Tour de Force, and him musing about them like sitting around while recording the album and being like, "This is it, this is our tour de force."
That's how you know that 38 special was old white men, and has always been old white men.
Should we refer to this as the Tour de Force edition of
the
Tour
Tour de Force Peltoncast?
All right.
I think the music edition was the Tour de Force. Here's some of the.
It was well regarded.
Well regarded. Wow, it wasn't even a Tour de Force. How about this? Critically acclaimed.
Oh wow.
Here were some of the texts I received from it.
Okay.
Yes, year in music episode out. My favorite time of year where I get to listen to you mansplain your brother constantly and be a manly sports bro and music nerd all at once. This is from a dude, by the way. Just gets me so excited all around. Your brother being like, okay, I hear you. And then you just going in on him even harder.
I don't know if I feel like that's how it goes, but fair.
Also, your Oasis story is so funny.
Did you say it was accurate? Did this person say whether it was inaccurate?
I was gonna say I kind of wanted to bring this up in the real podcast, not this post-pod business, whatever it is.
Oh my god!
I am telling you that the thing that I hate the most is when I say something that is so accurate, but people don't want to admit it, that they all push back on it. And I'm
people
sorry.
actually did not react to it at all.
Well, this was in real life. First off, the so funny thing, not saying whether it was true or not. What the person who texted me should have said was, your Oasis story is so accurate. However, I asked Mrs. Fantasy Genius right after. I was like, do you remember around the year 2000 when no one cared about Oasis? No one cared about Oasis. And it was like kind of like a weird, like kitschy thing to care about. It was almost like a joke to care about Oasis. And now all of a sudden people earnestly care about Oasis. And she was like, I went to Eastside Catholic High School. People just liked Oasis. And I was like, no, that is not true. I will not accept that there was a world outside of Boulevard Park or SeaTac, Washington. Thank you. But I'm sorry, but this is like when Chuck Klosterman talks about Pearl Jam was actually bigger than Nirvana before Kurt Cobain died. And it's just like you're screaming into the void about this, where you're like, people, I remember. I was there. I remember this moment, but nobody will agree. Like you could, it's like one of those things where you're like,
whose memory on this podcast is noted for its accuracy?
this is not this. First off, anyway, there is actually something that Chris told me. This is my favorite part about it. Was he has a sister who has like 1-year-old child, and they have like a music box thing that you like put in cards into and play songs. And he was like, did you know that the president? And I'm like, Casper Baby Pants, yes. I'm like, I know all of the information that you're talking about here. Yes. And he was like, I said that to my sister and her husband, and they were like, who are the presidents of the United States of America?
Oh, wow.
And he was like, peaches? And he was like, the kid was eating peaches right beforehand, and they didn't know what was going on. And I was like, what you sound like right now is the meme where you're like, okay, grandma, meme where you're like, in the 90s, Casper Baby Pants was the lead singer of a band called the Presidents of the United States of America, who had a hit song called Lump that was parodied by Weird Al Yankovic.
Presidents was played as one of the bumper songs on Sunday night. I'm pretty sure.
Go. Well,
so,
Chris's sister didn't hear it.
Still
They're not even that young.
Relevant.
I was just like, that's what you sound like right now with this information. But he was there. He was like, the kid was eating peaches, and I'm like, dog, if I would have been there, I would have been like, oh, yep. I would have been right there with you. But alas, it's not enough. A few people who know music these days, but it's not enough. We can start the podcast now.
I figured, yes.
People always like the end where I say something like, well, here we are.
It hit so hard.